everyone, I'm Randi Larson from the Generative AI Innovation Center at AWS. We're capturing the raw, unfiltered conversations that tell you what the what is when it comes to AI. In this episode, we're dropping into Seattle to find out what leading executives see in AI that others are completely missing. Which is why I'm so excited to welcome on two leaders in artificial intelligence who have had a seat at the table with these executives, who have seen what they're doing right when they're poised to win big, and also what's going less right. So welcome, Taimur. Welcome, Emily. Emily, so you are the Chief Innovation Officer at Loka, a Silicon Valley-based consultancy that's working to build AI solutions with everyone from small, scrappy startups to Fortune 500s. And Taimur, you're the Managing Director of the Generative AI Innovation Center at AWS, which is a global team of scientists, strategists, and other experts who are helping to make AI innovation into real practical business outcomes. And I'm Randi Larson, also with the Generative AI Innovation Center. Not a coincidence. And I'm so excited to have both of you on today. So Emily, I want to start with you, knowing that you work with both, cutting edge startups, Fortune 500s. I'm going to get a little renegade here. What's one thing that both groups are getting just flat out completely wrong?
Yeah, it's a great question. Honestly, I think when I think across the spectrum of different types of customers, that we're working with, both executives, I think, are having the problem of both thinking too big and also thinking too small. And so when I think about, kind of on the too big side of things, there's still a lot of executives out there that I think really don't fully understand what's happening, of course, in the generative AI space. And of course, it's changing all the time. So that makes sense. But also kind of see it as this magic bullet, right? I'm going to bring in AI and it's going to do, all these things for me. If I just connect my Slack and my email and my, name the productivity platform, all of a sudden my company is going to have X more revenue and, or I'm going to have autonomous agents that are doing all of these different actions, for my company, and it's going to happen in 2 months. The reality is that, yes, AI is having tremendous outcomes, for a lot of these organizations. It has a lot of power, but it's not yet, a magic bullet that's going to solve all the problems. There's still the same organizational best practices that need to be put in place. On the other side, I think we have people thinking too small, right? So they're like, okay, well, it is going to just be this little productivity, tool, or I'm going to take a workflow and I'm going to, rather than, reimagine how it might look with AI, I'm going to just exactly try to replicate it with an agentic system or, with a series, of models. And I think that has a lot more power and potential than that. And so I think, starting with having a good understanding of what is happening, in the market, what's possible, and kind of right sizing, those ideas inside the organization is a good starting point.
Okay, perfect. So don't think too big and lofty, don't think too small, but kind of take a step back and think more strategically about it.
As for your Goldilocks moment.
Your Goldilocks moment, exactly. Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself. Okay, and Taimur, as I'm thinking about this, I know that from your perch in the Generative AI Innovation Center, you're seeing all sorts of, different opportunities out there, different engagements that executives are working on. What's the biggest opportunity that you're seeing executives walk right past that actually pains you to see?
That's a great question. I think the one thing that executives are so focused on this AI experimentation phase that we're largely have been going through, right? And I think that's the one thing. And I think going back to your point earlier is that sometimes we can think too small. I think it's a good starting point, certainly, to think about one application, one business function, and how do you use AI to augment what human beings can do. But then again, you're thinking very small. If you think very big and very transformative, that the future organizations are going to be architected and built around these cognition systems, then you think very differently for how businesses can operate in the future. And we're seeing this in the Innovation Center. We've helped numerous customers with very specific point applications to eventually a few more applications, and that creates this momentum and this flywheel of creating this AI infrastructure to power the future organization that they see. So it's a massive opportunity. I know the numbers that you shared, they're the current numbers today. I expect them to keep going up over time. And that's how transformative the technology is.
Yeah, that's an interesting point about how it's not just about trying to look at what you're doing right now and to replicate that, but it's all the other things that you could potentially unlock that you're not even envisioning right now, right? The other tasks, the other job functions, on an entire systems level. I think that's huge. Okay, guys.
So there's something to add,
Yes.
to add to that too.
Yeah.
I think we talk a lot around organizational and business process transformation, with these foundational systems. But I think a lot of the value that we're seeing with customers as well is really around you transforming customer experiences. So you're thinking, how do people interact with SaaS applications, in an agentic world? How do people, what new products or offerings can exist that maybe were impossible in the market before, due to cost or to complexity, that are now opened up to be able to delight, customers, in the space. And that's something I think that's really exciting as well, because it's not just kind of about the cost optimizations, but it's about potentially revenue generation, and again, sort of this customer obsession, to steal an Amazonian term, right? Around how can we create wonderful experiences, with these new technologies.
Yeah, that's a great point. So how can you then provide that experience for the customer and in turn, through that flywheel effect, as you mentioned, contribute to the bottom line? I think that's a great point. Okay, so guys, with all of that said, why is it then that people are saying that this time is different? And if so, why should we believe them? Don't all call out at once.
I can get us started.
Go for it.
Well, I think this time is different because in order for any emerging technology to really get diffused in a way where it gets democratized, you do need several building blocks along the way, right? And if you see why is this time different is, number one, we have the infrastructure that these workloads need to run on, which is the cloud, and over the past 15, 20 years, that has matured for us. It's become the new normal for many organizations, right? Number two, there's vast amounts of data. And our knowledge and our ability to now train this data has advanced over the years. And we've gotten to a point now where, the transformer architecture is more ubiquitous, right? It is the foundation of a lot of these large language models and frontier models that have been built. So you have architectural advancement, you have compute accessibility, right? Our ability to access GPUs now is much better than what it was, several years ago.
Absolutely.
Right? And so you have this confluence of all these prerequisites that are now making the technology more accessible, right? So a very powerful large language model is available at the fingertips of just about anyone, whether you're a startup developer or whether you're an enterprise developer in an organization, right? And this time is different because the rapid pace at which the community is innovating on these foundational building blocks is also moving very, very fast. And now the cost of actually building an AI application is far less. So going back to that famous mantra, fail fast, it's just the opportunity now to experiment at a very rapid pace is there. And what that's creating, it's creating new opportunities, right? And so that's why I feel like this time is different.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that you mentioned the part about data, because having that strong data foundation, I think one of our peers has famously said, Milan Thompson-Pukovic, that if you have a data strategy, you have an AI strategy. And I'm sure that's evolved a little bit since, but data is a key part. Emily, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I mean, I think that we shouldn't be, scared of recognizing that there is some level of, excitement, hype even, around AI. It is one of the most transformative sort of moments of technology I've experienced, in my career. One of the most transformative moments, I think, in the last several decades.
Sure.
And I think, like we were talking about earlier, if we look at the sort of the .com, boom and bust, that the internet, there were some, reasons why that happened from an economic perspective, right? But the internet remained, and companies that were not able to find customers, before, or if they could only serve their local communities, could now find them online. I was saying like Amazon.com exists because the internet, what did they call it? I don't know, maybe .com heard of it.
Yeah.
But that exists. And so I think just like that, that we are going to see, AI is going to, remain as just like, the internet, websites, the changes to the economic structure that existed because of that, cycle. And maybe there'll be some adjustments along the way as there would be naturally. But that, I think, unlike many of these other cycles, I think we're maybe better poised to adjust and, recover from those changes. We're already really making these adjustments in real time, I think, to your point, with the technologies as quickly as it's emerging, and the fact that it's so broadly being used, right? This isn't like the big data moment, right? Where that's very much a data engineering sort of internal IT conversation. This is something that, my mom talks about how she used Claude today and asked it some questions, right? This is, a different moment from a spread of use as well, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. And as we look at this, evolution, we can't help but dig deeper into agents, right? Which is, Taimur, I know your favorite topic. So,
absolutely.
So I want to ask you a little bit more, actually, along the same thread about agents. As we see this evolution happening, what can companies do today that they absolutely couldn't do 6 months ago?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do feel like there's a lot more possibilities right now with agents. And if you look at it 6 or even 9 months ago, much of the conversation was around conversation, right? So it's like, how do you use generative AI to really look at it through the lens of conversation? And, that obviously gave rise to a lot of the apps that we have today, whether they're summarization tools, content generation tools, or even, your classic AI-assisted product, whether it's for software engineering or for frontline workers. I think what we see right now is with agents, now you can think beyond conversation and you can actually think about business operations, right? You have upstream capabilities and then downstream capabilities. Downstream are really about those functional things around sales, marketing, and support. And when you look at the upstream workflows or business processes, as we like to call it, they can be very R&D centric. And then as you go down that, then you have that kind of the middle part of the value chain, right? Where you're really taking kind of the IP of an industry and then figuring out how do you commercialize it and industrialize it, right?
Fascinating.
And the biggest opportunity there is now how agents then can fuel that whole operations, right? That whole value chain. And we're seeing this with customers that we work with today, whether it's in financial services, and with some customers, we're looking at how do you reimagine business lending, where you can not only reduce the OpEx that's associated with that activity, but you can reduce the cycle time that it actually takes to approve a business loan. And, the army of people that have to go and approve a business loan, how do you then bring agents to that, where either agents are augmenting existing human capital, or you're actually looking at your operations completely differently, right? So that what aspects of it can be fully autonomous through agents. And that's why I'm particularly excited about what we launched with Bedrock Agent Core, which is there's so many aspects that go into building and operationalizing an agent. Why should we have that undifferentiated heavy lifting on the shoulders of every company?
Yeah, that's a great point.
We're going to take that, we're going to offer these 7 primitives, which are the common things that go into any agent. And so now you have a very streamlined and consistent way for how you can build, deploy, and operate agents at scale.
Yeah, and that general availability of Agent Core is going to be really huge, I think,
Absolutely.
for a lot of companies now. So Emily, a CEO walks into your office, or calls you on the phone, whatever you want to call it, and asks you, what can I be doing with agents right now? I'm excited about it. What can I do with agents? But also, what should I not be using them for? What's your honest answer?
I think the agents can do an awful lot, right? There is a vast amount of, workflow automation. I think to Taimur's point, various transformations of on the product side, that can be made, in this space. I would say think big, right? What are the different ways that you can be using this? I try to break it down instead into how to think about agents rather than what they can and can't do. And so I think a lot about, one of the customers that we've worked with that creates kind of the administrative billing and patient record system for urgent care clinics. It's actually a joint customer that we worked on within in the Innovation Center. And one of the problems, as all of us know who have been to urgent care, is that patient intake and sort of those next steps, super painful, right?
Lengthy.
And maybe you show up at ADM and you're lucky and you're the first person in line, and maybe there's a whole line of people in front of you, and the people that are there, the physicians, the nurses, are under tremendous pressure to be getting people through, but also with good quality of care. And so what we were able to do, with this particular customer is take, transcripts using more traditional transcription technology. And so I think that creates a much more predictable experience for all of us, hopefully moves people through who need to see care quickly. And really shows a lot of the power, behind these experiences. The other side of your question, like, what should I not do? I wouldn't say that there's anything that you shouldn't do with agents, but I would say that a lot of executives that we speak with have a lot of fear around fully autonomous agents. I think that when people think agents, they immediately think it's going to automate everything, and then it's going to mess up, and it's going to be on me, and there's going to be liability. Right. The reality is that a lot of these systems, and obviously the majority of agents that we're working with right now, have autonomous elements to them, obviously, but they're also interacting with humans, right? It's a dance. And so I think that the human in the loop piece is something that's often not thought through fully by executives. And I find it's one of the most powerful, use cases in AI is how can we work better, with these agents or with individual LLMs in certain cases to create better outcomes, better experiences for businesses, for people.
Right. And also, as you kind of think about, as we step deeper into agents, it'll be democratized, sort of the understanding around there's a spectrum of autonomy as well, right? So it isn't simply going from, all human workforce to just, complete automation. Like there's a real spectrum there, gradual evolution. And I love the point that you bring up about healthcare, right? Because when you think about all of this in the context of technology, if you think about that downstream impact on a human level with healthcare, I'm just picturing, my grandmother waiting in line, taking forever to get seen, and now it's like the quality of care is so much more improved for the individual, and you also and then even bedside manner, right, among providers can improve because it frees up time, and so I think that's pretty remarkable. Okay, I want to scoot over now to a very different topic. We talked about failures, productive failures, we'll call them. Emily, what would you say, kind of conversely, is the biggest learning or takeaway that you've seen from an AI investment that went sideways? And why is it that smart people continue to make the same mistakes?
To me, this really has to do with fundamentals. This isn't necessarily about taking a technology and fitting it in for technology's sake. This is really about what business problem, can these technologies solve, and have I thought about it correctly? From I have identified a real pain point? Can it be solved, with generative AI in an effective and cost-effective, way? What is my return on investment? Do I have a clear metric that once I put the system in place that I can measure it and say, this was my baseline and I got to this point with AI, so that I can know that the time and money that I've invested in this space made sense, right? And so when I think through, that it's like, what are the business fundamentals? And then what are the organizational fundamentals? You mentioned earlier, data and data access. Also, like, is your data, even if you have a lot of it, is it accessible? Is it in a position where it can be best used, by these models? In many cases, these are line of business applications that may be helping my sales team or my marketing team or my customer success team. But at the end of the day, someone needs to be maintaining these systems. Thinking through all of these pieces in advance is part of what helps set a really good, strong business foundation. Then do your proof of concept, make sure the technology is going to actually bear out the results you want. And then guess what? You have all the pieces in place to go directly into a production environment and actually reap the benefits of it, because you've thought through the fundamentals from the beginning. And so it's not necessarily rocket science, right? And then it's not different, I think, than these other trends. But, thinking there and not thinking I need AI right now, thinking what are the major problems I have for my business? Can they be solved with AI? And if so, let's run some experiments to see if they'll work. And then immediately look forward to the next step of getting these, into the market and into the hands of my customers or into the hands of, my employees.
Yeah, no, that's a great point about how enthusiasm aside, if you have the house in order, right? The basics of like, is your data organized? Is it accessible to everybody? It's not locked away in silos. I mean, that's huge. It's a huge part of it. Okay, Taimur, kind of similarly, I want to ask you, what would you say is the most surprising breakthrough that you've seen come from generative AI or from AI in general that nobody was expecting?
Well, there's certainly two ways of looking at breakthroughs, right? One is the technical breakthroughs, right?
Yeah.
And then I think the technical breakthroughs actually open up what I like to call business breakthroughs, right? And, for example, the transformer model or the transformer architecture, for example, what it did for large language models, a big, kind of scientific breakthrough, right? Architecturally. And then you have the business breakthrough that's based off of that scientific one, right? Which is the AI powered assistance that we see, right? Conversational interfaces, whether it's what is being offered through AWS, which you see out in the, kind of broader market. And so we see a lot of work in the Innovation Center where customers are not only figuring out how do you take the technology, as Emily said, and infuse it into your existing business, but then actually how do you create new businesses altogether, right? That are now on this new paradigm of generative AI and agentic AI. And what's fascinating for us is just seeing companies, kind of do both of them simultaneously, right? One great example is an electronics manufacturer in St. Petersburg, Florida, by the name of Jabil. And the fact that within just a couple of weeks, they were able to build an AI assistant for their shop floor workers, which was addressing a big problem, which was how do you get access to product-related information? You're talking about 25 different data sources, over 1,700 policies.
Wow.
And that would slow down just the efficiency of the teams, right? And now you have an AI-powered assistant built on Q Business, which took just a couple of weeks to build. And now you're seeing anywhere from 30 to 35% productivity gains, right?
Wow.
Which I think is not only, I think it's a bit of a business breakthrough, but the real business breakthrough is now how they're reimagining what is the role of a shop floor worker now that you have 30% productivity. And it's just fascinating to see that both the scientific breakthroughs and the business breakthroughs actually feed each other. And one thing that I'm particularly excited about is when we talk about agentic AI and these multi-agent architectures, one of the biggest things that will help that is how memory and context is
That's a big one.
maintained
Yeah.
with agents. Today, we're still so fascinated with human memory. I don't think we've uncovered just the potential of human memory. And I do feel like we're going to see that with agents as well too. Like this memory context, I think we just don't realize how big it is.
Sure.
And so I think we'll see some scientific breakthroughs in memory management and context for agents, which will then fuel existing ways that can be reimagined, right? But then fundamentally new ways and new businesses that can be built on top of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think just for that clarification point for when you talk about context, right? Context engineering, you might hear context orchestration. It's that notion of what are all of the things, all of the data, all the inputs that I can give my agent access to, right? So that it can then perform bigger, better, more complex tasks. Is that how you would define it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And Randi, something, can I interject there as well?
Yeah.
Maybe not unexpected, because your question was unexpected, but I think to me, one of the more meaningful areas that we've been doing a lot of work in is in the space of drug discovery. And these generative AI models, especially the sort of large models that have been trained on entire human and primate genomes and can kind of understand genomic materials and alphabet, these are actually powering massive advancements, in the drug discovery space already. And instead of something taking maybe months or years, to be able to get to market from a hypothesis, then into the lab, now we're having these generated, molecules that have been tweaked to be able to bind to a cancer site, for instance, to inhibit its growth or to degrade the proteins associated, with the cancer, being developed in, weeks and then getting into labs, within months, which accelerates the possibility of us being able to find cures, for rare cancers. And so to me, there's tremendous hope, and the breakthroughs that it can possibly be coming from generative AI, whether that be reimagining, business models and getting people, out of routine tasks that maybe were boring and giving them superpowers. They can do more things and higher things with their time, or it's, curing cancers, or again, improving those patient experiences. So I'm tremendously optimistic about the kind of business breakthroughs that are coming from the technology advancements.
Yeah. Yeah, I love to hear about examples like that. I mean, it really does infuse a lot of optimism into the conversation. What is one thing about AI implementation that you really wish more execs understood before they even got started? Taimur,
I can get started there. There are possibly two areas that I think AI executives and just executives in general are probably not thinking about. And if they are, they're not giving it the importance that it needs right now, right? There's a lot of advancement with AI models and our ability to customize those models as well too, right? One area that I see that we're not thinking as much about is the learning, the post-production learning that has to happen, right? It's very similar to us. We go through education, we get pedagogical education, but then it's only when we're in the workforce that we actually apply those, right? AI is the same way too. You can train a model, you can deploy it, but it's really about the learning, the reinforcement learning that happens, what they like to call the learning loop, right? There's white space there right now with just the infrastructure, the process, the understanding that can support that, right? Because that's just going to make the AI better. The other thing that we know of, but we always go back to it whenever we deploy AI systems, is data prep.
Right.
And so how do you go at the beginning part of the spectrum and now really use AI to have richer data, better quality data? And I'm not just talking about synthetic data, but the actual data there, right? And so I think that's another area that teams are starting to focus more on, right? The third area is, it's not about the bigger model. It's not about the accurate model. Those are very important, but it's about how do these intelligently integrate with existing systems? That is going to be the next focus area. And that's why, things like model context protocol and agent-to-agent protocols are very important for us, because it really allows us to diffuse the intelligence into our existing applications. So I think those are three areas that will require a lot more focus going forward.
Yeah. That's a great point about moving beyond kind of the flashiness of agents into what really matters, that strong foundation. Taimur, I have one final question for you, because I want to hear your opinion from the Innovation Center viewpoint. How should execs be prepping today so that they're poised to hit the ground running in 2026?
I think there are two very important things to keep in mind as executives and companies get ready for 2026. If the phase of generative AI, and by the way, we're still going through that phase, right? We're just at a very different sort of inflection point of it. What that allowed us to do was really identify the art of the possible. And I think keeping a balance of the art of the possible. But now with agentic AI, we have to be very thoughtful in what is the art of the permissible, right? Because we're in this natural phase of power versus permissions, right? It's a paradox that we're in, is that, these agents have so many powerful things that they can do. Because now the AI can not only reason, act, and learn, it can do the full spectrum of these things, sort of beyond reasoning. And obviously with great power comes great responsibility, and that's why governance is going to be so important for us, right? And so with lots of power and no permissions, you can have chaos, right? Just going back to your point entropy. That it could just, this entropy is really high on those things.
Yeah.
But then permissions without power, you're just in analysis paralysis, right? So you don't have that ability to actually do anything with it, right? So as executives look at 2026, the biggest thing that I would say is just balancing the art of the possible with the art of the permissible. And then keeping in mind that the most important thing that's going to fuel that is governed infrastructure,
Right.
trusted infrastructure. Oftentimes we look at the shiny object, we look at the tip of the iceberg, and we're very excited, which we should be. But we also realize that the iceberg underneath requires a lot of complex decisions, a lot of investments, and very thoughtfulness, because that's going to fuel the capabilities that sit on top of it. So keeping that balance is going to be very important, keeping the focus on trusted infrastructure and governed infrastructure, and then also realizing that AI is not a tool. It's not about bringing AI to my existing business, which is certainly a thing. But if you really want the full potential of it, it is about saying, how do I take a new reimagined business, which is now based on this cognitive system, which has this good balance between possibility and, permissibility.
So eloquently said. Yeah. All right. Well, both, thank you so much for your time. I think we're at the end of our time now, but it's been such a pleasure. And I'm sure the executives listening have learned a ton. I know I certainly have. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Randi.